Welcome back. So if you're interested in vinyl, surely you realize that the Record Store Day releases were announced today. So Record Store is coming up on April 22nd. It's a little bit away, but anyway, they put out the releases. For those of us who are interested in jazz, I actually think that there are a few pretty exciting titles. Overall, I don't know what to say. Let me think about this. So first of all, there aren't that many reissues. At least it feels like there's a lot of new content. However, for me, it kind of feels like it's missing a little bit. Like, you remember that year, what was it, last year? Was the year before when Quiet Kenny came out? Like, that was an exciting year. This year, there is like at least one, I think, exciting release, but it was also put out in a stereo version. This year's mono. Put out in stereo version like a year or two ago. So I don't know, there's not like this kind of flashy releases this year. Also, if there's anything that's a story of this year, it's low pressing quantity. So if you're interested in jazz vinyl and you're going out for Record Store Day, I think that there's going to be heavier competition, except for like maybe one or two titles. Anyway, I think that's the story. Is it's a little bit more obscure. It's a little bit bringing stuff that has like never been released before and making it available, which is cool. But it kind of lacks a little bit of the punch. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens, I guess, on the day. But I do think that scarcity of some of these titles is going to come into play. What we're going to do is we're going to dive into, as I usually do with these things, I think I've done a few of these at this point. I'm just going to run down the list of jazz titles that I was able to identify. If I missed anything, please let me know, because sometimes I miss them. Like, I see the artist in it and I don't recognize the artist, and so I miss that it's a jazz title. So anyway, let me know in the comments if I missed anything, but without further ado, let's just get into it. All right, so first up, we're going to cover a Albert Ayler release. And as usual, I'm going to put the stuff up here. Here's the thing. If these are reissues, if I have them, then I'll show them to you. But again, like I said, most of this stuff is not necessarily reissues, or if it is a reissue, it's like a reissue of a CD. I haven't bought a CD in a while. So anyway, when I have it, I'll show it to you. When I don't, I'm just going to show you a picture of what the artwork looks like up here. So this first one is Albert Ayler, and I believe it's called Europe 1966. This is a 4 LP set. 4 LPs. This is the largest out of any of the releases I think I'm going to cover. It's being put out by ORG Music in a quantity of 1,900. So what this consists of is live 1966 performances. The lineup includes Donald Ayler, which is Albert Ayler's brother. You also have Michael Samso, William Falwell, and Beaver Harris on this thing. It is pressed at, I believe what's pronounced Palace, in Germany. Could be Palais. I don't think it's Palais, right? It's Palace, right? In Germany. So anyway, it's a big set. Albert Ayler has been like strangely present in Record Store Day releases, I feel like, over the last like 5 years. I say strangely because maybe I'm not as interested in getting this obscure live stuff. Don't get me wrong. I like Albert Ayler. I like some of his stuff on impulse. I just don't know, for me at least, that that's translated across to me wanting to like really dive deep into these undiscovered sessions, because a lot of this stuff is pretty free jazz sort of in style, and I gotta be honest, sometimes it doesn't keep my attention. So anyway, for me, you know, I'm not going to get Albert Ayler Europe 1966, but for those who are fans of it, 4 LPs, I mean, my gosh, is this going to be like $100 or something? I have no idea. We'll find out. But anyway, that is the first release for Record Store Day. All right, number 2 is more free jazz. It's Archie Shepp, and it is called A Massy. I think there's an accent over it, so maybe it's A Massy or something like that. Anyway, it's a double LP. It's put out by the LR label. I think it's French. There's only 1,000 copies of this thing. So interestingly, in the description, they said the first release of it is going to be opaque pink, and the second is going to be opaque white color. I don't even know what that means. I don't know if there's a US version and a international version. I don't know what they're getting at between first and second. That actually comes up with a few of these titles. Anyway, we'll find out. So the lineup in this one is Beaver Harris again. Wasn't he just in that Albert Ayler one? You also have Cameron Brown, you have Dave Burrell, and then you have Charles Greenlee on this one. This one was recorded live in 1975. Originally, it was released actually in 1976, only in France. There's never been a reissue of this thing. It's not terribly expensive in its original form. You can get it for like 25, 30 bucks, in its original form. So what do you get here? Well, it is quite free. I actually previewed this thing. It's not terribly well recorded, I will say. It's kind of raucous. And if you like free jazz, you're probably accustomed to that. There's a lot going on. And it's with like sort of simultaneous improvisation by multiple musicians. So if you kind of like that, I don't mean to like put this thing down, but it sounded tinny to me. It sounded like it wasn't well recorded. Like sometimes the bass and the drums were too hot. I hesitate to say bass is hot, but you know what I mean? It's like too present in the mix. So I don't know. For me, little messy. Again, it's a live recording. If you like Archie Shepp, you're not going to care about this. Sorry, you're not going to care about my comments. You're going to care about this release. But anyway, yeah, it is what it is. So number one, Albert Ayler. Number two, Archie Shepp. We're leading off with a couple of free jazz titles. All right, next up is Bill Evans. What is a record store day without a Bill Evans lost recording, right? So this one is called Treasures. And then Solos, Trio, and Orchestral Records from Denmark. This is a 3 LP release. It is by Elemental / maybe Anagram Music. Some of these stuff is in like partnership with each other. Hard to figure that out. Anyway, this consists of recordings from 1965 to 1969. This is all, I believe, previously unreleased stuff. It's a mix of live, studio, and radio broadcasts. Okay, so 180 gram. As I said, it's a 3 LP release. It is mastered by Bernie Grunman. So that's something. They're putting it out in a quantity of 4,000, so it's a little bit more than some of those other releases. And the description calls it a holy grail. Give me a break. How many times do we have to have lost recordings that you have to get by Bill Evans? It's for me, it's ridiculous. Every time it's like, there's like this mad grab to get these Bill Evans stuff. And then I tell you what, outside of a few releases from a few years ago, this stuff is like, it doesn't go up in value. I'm sorry. I feel like there's people that are like grabbing this stuff thinking that they can flip it. I don't know. I don't think you're gonna be able to flip this thing. So anyway, the musicians include Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen, who's fantastic. You have Alan Dawson, Alex Reel, some of the pronunciation, Palais Mikkelborg, who's a trumpeter, which is actually super interesting. So if you want something different with Bill Evans, have him paired with a trumpeter. Eddie Gomez is in this, Marty Morell, the Royal Danish Symphony Orchestra, and the Danish Radio Big Band. Obviously not at once. I mentioned that there's all these different formats. But anyway, that is the gist of this thing. I have to be honest, I am past this Bill Evans mania. Don't get me wrong. I love Bill Evans stuff. I love it on Riverside. I love it on, like Warner Brothers, some of that late stuff. But for Record Store Day, it feels like a money grab to me. And if you like Bill Evans, you're not going to care about my comments. You're going to go get it. But that's just how it feels to me. I don't know. I'm just tired of it. All right, next up is Charlie Parker, Afro-Cuban Bop. This is the long-lost Bird Live Recordings. Long-lost Bird Live Recordings. This is a double LP release. Gosh, everything is multiple LPs, it seems. This is put out by Liberation Hall, possibly in partnership with Rock Beat. It was originally put out on CD in 2015, so it's not entirely new. They're putting it out in a quantity of 2,500 copies. This is recordings from the 40s and 50s. I think predominantly like 46 to like 51 or so. Most of this material, if not all, was previously released in other formats. So there have been so many Bird compilations. out there, right? Like even, I mean, Savoy was doing it in like the 50s. They were doing, you know, sort of after he died, they were putting out compilations. So I don't know exactly where this stuff is sourced from. I know that a lot of it, I think, if not all, has been released in other formats, but this is the first time it's being compiled in this format. I did preview some of this. It is old sounding for sure. There's a lot of audience noise in these recordings, but that's what you're going to get when you listen to Charlie Parker stuff of this era. There's always going to be audience noise, especially in the, I mean, obviously in the live stuff, right? So the locations that this was recorded in include the Renaissance Ballroom, the Jubilee, which is in LA, Carnegie Hall, the Civic Auditorium in Portland, Oregon, Municipal Arena in Kansas City, and then the Birdland in New York. So a number of venues, and don't get me wrong, it's pretty cool to be able to hear recordings from some of these venues in the late 40s and early 50s. So at the same time that I would say that the majority of the band sounds washed out, like it's in the back, Charlie Parker sounds pretty good. Don't get me wrong, it's still that kind of older sound, but he does sound good. In the lineups, because there's like lineups, you know, across these different formats from these different eras, you do have a number of interesting musicians, I think, to hear. You have John Lewis, you have Kenny Clark, Dexter Gordon, Woody Herman, Red Rodney, Kenny Drew, Art Blakey, Howard McGee, Dizzy Gillespie, is it Gillespie? Milt Jackson, Stan Levy, and Stan Kenton. So there is just a ton of different formats here, again, across a variety of different venues. And so, I don't know, like if you're a Charlie Parker sort of fiend, then you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this one. So again, you know, it's an interesting release. And personally, it feels like there's a lot of either renewed interest in early bop, or maybe these companies are forcing it on us, because it seems like there's a lot of attention on that era lately with some of the reissues. So we'll see what happens with that one. All right, so what would Record Store Day be without a Chet Baker title? Guess what? There are two. So the first one is called Blue Room, the 1979 VARA Studio Sessions in Holland. This is a double LP. We really can't get a single LP out of this day, can we? The label is Jazz Detective. This is going to be in a quantity of 3,000. It's also being released on CD, I believe, simultaneously. I actually don't recognize anyone in the lineup. It does include bass, drums, and piano only, and it's across sort of a few different formats, a few different lineups. So I actually don't know much about this one. That doesn't exactly surprise me, considering it's 1979, Chet Baker, recorded in Holland. But if you're a Chet Baker fan, there may be something there for you. So the other one is what I actually want to focus on. So this is Chet Baker, Chet, right? So this one is on Riverside, and actually I thought I was going to pull it out, but I'll just put it up here and you'll see it. So Kraft Recordings is putting this out under their Concord label. So they put out a stereo of this, which actually did sell out, to be fair, but they put it out, I want to say last year, could have been the year prior. This is the mono version of it, and I actually kind of think this point is important, because I've heard stereo versions and I've heard mono versions, and I actually think that there's a lot of benefit to both of them. And I think that when the stereo came out, a lot of people were saying, why didn't you put the mono out? Well, here it is. They're putting out the mono for Record Store Day. So this release has Bill Evans, Pepper Adams, Kenny Burrell, Paul Chambers, Connie Kay or Philly Joe Jones on drums, and then you have Herbie Mann on flute as well. This is it's an exciting recording, I think. So typically this stuff is, when I say this stuff, it's Chet Baker and it's on Kraft. You know that they're going to do a good job, and out of like all of the Record Store Day releases, I feel like this is the only one that says it's all analog. So it's all analog mastering by Kevin Gray. It is limited to 10,000 copies, by far the largest pressing out of any of these jazz releases. It is pressed on 180 gram vinyl at RTI. I've heard that there may not be that 10,000 strictly for the US, that actually the US is only getting 6,500 copies and the rest is going international. But I think this is singularly the most exciting release of Record Store Day. It is all but guaranteed to be a audiophile quality reissue, whatever you, however that means to you. But it has all the hallmarks of it, right? So this is going to be super high quality. Don't know what it's going to cost. It's probably going to be reasonable. It's just a single LP. So anyway, I don't know. Hopefully you share my excitement with this one. Chet Baker, Chet in mono. All right, one of the most cryptic ones is interestingly an Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers title. You'd think that they'd provide more detail, but all I have is this. It is called Live at Jazz Workshop. It was recorded in 1970. I believe it was the only recording, of this particular format. Don't know exactly what that means because I don't know who's on it, but Gearbox Records is putting it out. I don't know who Gearbox is, but that's great. It's in a quantity of 1,800, which is strangely low considering it's an Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, but it is relatively late, right? So I don't know, this isn't even quite Wynton Marsalis era, right? No, this can't be. This is like sort of somewhere in between. So the interesting thing about this one, despite the fact that there's such limited information, is what they have said is it comes with a QR code with 5 hours of additional content that has been previously unreleased. So they're kind of leading us in with vinyl, and then they're giving us digital, I suppose, this extra 5 hours. But it could be interesting. I mean, here's the thing. Art Blakey kept a good lineup really throughout his recording history. So he always picked good people. The music always sounded good. This could be something interesting, but I'm going to have to wait until I see that lineup, I guess, before I add it to my list. All right, so while I apparently didn't want to take Chet out, I decided to take Newport Rebels out. So this is one that's also being put out by Craft Recordings under their Candid sort of sub-label. And this is credited to the Jazz Artists Guild, and it is called Newport Rebels. So you may realize that Candid has been putting out stuff for a record store day over the last year at least. They put out a Charles Mingus title, which is really good. And anyway, this is another. It has Charles Mingus, even though it's credited, to the Newport Rebels. You also have Max Roach, Eric Dolphy, Roy Eldridge, and not Philly Joe Jones. That's just Joe Jones, right? Yeah, just Joe Jones. Just Joe Jones. So anyway, this is an original pressing, right? But they're putting out the reissue in a quantity of 2,000, which is pretty limited. It's going to be in 180 gram, remastered by Bernie Grunman. They're calling it a 24-point matte jacket. That's actually new terminology. I don't know what 24-point means. It's got to mean like the thickness of it, I suppose. But I don't know exactly what that means. And they're saying it's a exclusive cover. If memory serves, the Charles Mingus title they put out last year might have been in like a maroon vinyl. So they haven't said exactly what the vinyl color is going to be, possibly because it's TBD, but they're saying it's in a exclusive cover. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, next we have Larry Coryell. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and it is introducing the 11th House. This is a reissue. It's being put out by Culture Factory USA, not familiar with that label, in a quantity of 1,500. Again, very limited. So a couple of features. It does have a gatefold jacket. It does have an obi strip. It is in a specialty color vinyl. It says two things. It says clear, and then it also says blue, purple, clear swirl. I don't know, again, if that means that there's two versions for the US, or if one is for the US, one is for abroad. But anyway, it is fusion. I'm not a huge fan of this artist. I got to be honest, I believe he did have a Record Store Day release last year as well. I didn't get that. But that's just me, right? I'm not a fusion guy. You may be a fusion person and be interested in this one. So the next one is an interesting one. This is Max Roach and Archie Shepp, and there's a variety of titles here, or they're just like one after the other. I don't know. It's called Force, Sweet Mao, Swede Africa. From 1976, it is a double LP. It is being put out by LMLR. Again, I believe that's a French label. So let's see, recorded in 1976, you got an obi strip on this thing. It is gatefold. They're putting it out as a color vinyl. thing. And again, they're saying first and second. And again, I don't know if that's like US and international, if there's two versions for the US, no idea. But one is in clear amber and the other is clear brown color vinyl. Know very little about this. One thing I do know is that Max Roach actually found himself recording with saxophonists as a duet somewhat frequently. So there's actually a great album, I want to say from the late 70s or maybe it's the early 80s with Anthony Braxton that's fantastic. So this one has him with Archie Shepp. And yeah, it'll be, that's an interesting one, but it's adding to the list of this kind of like stuff that is not necessarily widespread appeal. So up to you. If you're interested in this stuff, keep an eye out for that one. All right, so Miles Davis. Everyone gets excited by Miles Davis for Record Store Day. I'm excited about this one. It is called Turnaround, Rare Miles from the Complete on the Corner Sessions. So Complete on the Corner Sessions are obviously an extension of On the Corner, the album. It was put out in like a 5 or maybe a 6 CD box set. It was like a tin thing. They put it out in, I want to say, the 90s or maybe early 2000s. At some point I had it and I paid retail for it. I ended up flipping it for like $150, which back when I was in college, when I flipped it, was a ton of money compared to what I paid for it. And so even though I kind of miss it these days, you know, it is what it is. So this is being put out by Columbia. It's in a quantity of 5,700, which is the second highest volume title for jazz reissues or jazz releases. What they're calling it is being cherry picked from the complete sessions. So at the same time that there was like 5 or 6 CDs, whatever that was, they are, maybe it was more than that, I'm trying to think, but they're picking out a selection of it, and I believe it's only a single LP. So it is not the Complete on the Corner Sessions. It is in no way complete. But what they're trying to do, I suppose, is pick like some of the best takes or sort of alternate tracks from that stuff that didn't make the original album. I really like On the Corner. I personally find that this is his best of his like post In a Silent Way work. And so, and I would include Bitches Brew in that because I'm not as much of a fan of that, but I like On the Corner. So this one is kind of interesting, but I'm sure that I've heard it before because it was probably on that CD box set that I used to have. So anyway, we'll see. I mean, you know, for those folks who are into Miles's sort of electric, sort of post Bitches Brew thing, I think that this could be an exciting title. So, you know, obviously Miles has a lot of cachet right as well. So I'm sure that that one's going to be in high demand. All right, one of the most interesting titles is this. Eric Dolphy, and it's called Musical Prophet, the expanded 1963 New York studio sessions. Resonance Records is putting this out. They have a great reputation. I'm going to candidly say not for packaging, but they have a great reputation for music. So this is a triple LP in a quantity of only 2,000. It is mastered by Kevin Gray. This is going to be hard to get, even though it's a triple LP. I think it's going to be in demand. What they did is they compiled 2 existing albums, by the way. So you have Conversations, and then you have Iron Man. Okay, so 2 existing albums that you could buy, plus 85 additional minutes of stuff. So those 2 albums that I mentioned have only gone up in price lately. They're hard to get, harder and harder to get anyway. And I have a strong suspicion that the price of this thing is going to be less than if you actually source those albums, plus you get that 85 minutes of additional stuff. And Eric Dolphy, known for these sort of extended improvisations, I think it could be exciting. Some of the musicians on this album include Clifford Jordan, Sonny Simmons, Woody Shaw, Richard Davis, and Bobby Hutcherson. There's going to be some good lineups in this thing. I think, personally, even though a lot of the content is reissue, I think this one's going to be in high demand. All right, apologies. I actually had to splice this one in after the fact. So this is going to be a Shirley Scott title called Queen Talk, live at the Left Bank. It is a double LP, and it is being put out by the Reel to Reel label. So they're putting this out in a quantity of 2,000, I believe, domestically, and then either another 1,000 worldwide, or maybe it's 3,000 worldwide. Anyway, it's going to be hand numbered for folks who that matters to. And the lineup here that we have is Bobby Durham, George Coleman, and Ernie Andrews. So this is a 1972 recording. I think it looks to be pretty exciting. So one of the reasons why I say that is because one of the tracks that's actually on this recording is a John Coltrane tune called Impressions. And so the fact that she's taking on perhaps more adventurous music, to me, you know, I don't know, just makes me a little bit more sort of excited about this session. So 100 minutes of music though, it's packaged in a gatefold sleeve with a additional booklet. So there could be, I don't know, something here for someone who's a fan of Shirley Scott. All right, last one in voiceover format. I apologize, but actually, so the PDF and the web version of the Record Store Day release list are different, and so I had to like compare them, and I found this one. Anyway, so this is Roy Ayers' Stoned Soul Picnic. I actually have an original of this. It's a really nice record. This is being put out by the Nature Sounds label. I believe they're putting it out on red vinyl, like splatter-colored sort of red vinyl. This is a 1968 album by Ayers, and has a really amazing lineup, actually. So you've got Gary Bartz, Hubert Laws, Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, and Grady Tate. So anyway, I think that this, you know, in its original form has become increasingly hard to get. So I don't have personal experience with this label, but you know, fingers crossed that that this edition is going to be is going to sound good. All right, next one up is one of two Sonny Stitt recordings. So this one is called The Bubba's Sessions. It is a double LP release. It is by Who's Who in Jazz. This is not a label that is familiar to me. It's being put out in a quantity of just 1,200, so another limited release. This is supposed to be Sonny Stitt's very last live recording. So I believe it was recorded in 1981. He then died in 1982, and the first time that this saw the light of day in terms of its release was in 1983. So there actually is a pretty interesting lineup. So despite the fact that this is an 80s session for Sonny Stitt, he actually had some old school guys on the recording. So you have Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Harry Sweets Edison, you have Duffy Jackson and Don Mast on this thing. So I don't know that much about this. I do know that they say that it's on heavyweight vinyl. Don't know if that's 180 gram. And they also say it's on color vinyl. I'm not sure yet on exactly, in terms of exactly what color that is. But anyway, again, a double LP of Sonny Stitt from the 80s. It's kind of an interesting choice, I would say, but could be interesting, especially because of that lineup. So the other Sonny Stitt release is also a double LP. So essentially we have 4 LPs of Sonny Stitt for Record Store Day. This one is called Boppin in Baltimore, live at the Left Bank. So the label that's putting this out is called Jazz Detective. It is in a quantity of 1,800. Recorded in 1973, so almost 10 years prior the other one. On this one, you have Kenny Barron, Sam Jones, and Louis Hayes, so very much more sort of modern guys, whereas that other release is like kind of a little bit more old school guys. So, you know, modern for the time anyway. So this one is, I would say, more interesting to me than the other one. And the reason why is because not only do I like this lineup a little bit better, these are sort of guys in their prime, considering it's 1973 and you have like Louis Hayes, Kenny Barron, and Sam Jones. Well, okay, Sam Jones had been around a little bit. But it's 180 gram and it's mastered by Bernie Grundman. So just the fact that there's a little bit more attention placed on this one, I think, makes it more interesting. Moving right along, Sun Ra, right? So Sun Ra, everybody likes Sun Ra. That's not the case at all, but Sun Ra excites a lot of folks. This one is live at Haverford College from January 1980. It is on the Modern Harmonic label. It is in a quantity of 1,400. So very limited. Here is the thing. This is Sun Ra solo. He's on solo Rhodes piano, just him. There's no one else. So it's not Sun Ra and the orchestra. It is Sun Ra solo piano. I actually have never heard him play solo piano. It could be very good. I'm personally not a huge Sun Ra fan. So I will, I don't know, maybe stream this or borrow it from somebody who gets it. Just because that doesn't sound that, it just doesn't sound that interesting to me. And I'm kind of that way with solo performances as a whole. So there's a lot of like, what is it, like 70s and 80s stuff where it's just like solo saxophone, whether it's like Anthony Braxton or I'm trying to think who else would kind of do some of this stuff. But like but or even like solo piano. Like, I'm sorry, even some of the India navigation stuff. What is it, like Anthony Davis, who put out some solo stuff? I'm just not interested that much in solo musicians for an entire LP. I like the interaction. So anyway, for me, even though it's Sun Ra, 1980 solo Rhodes piano, I'm probably going to leave it. All right, so this next one is called Bossa Nova at Carnegie Hall. So this one is being put out by the Liberation Hall label, jazz label. This is not the only release that they have for Record Store Day. There's a couple of them. So this particular one is from 1962, and it is recorded live at Carnegie Hall, which is why it's called Bossa Nova at Carnegie Hall. They haven't led with the musicians who are on it in terms of the title, but, maybe that doesn't matter because there's a lot of folks who are just interested in this style. And so that may support their decision to put it out in a quantity of 2,500, which kind of in the middle between like super limited and like a little bit more wide availability. So some of the musicians are actually super impressive on this thing, especially for 1962. Some of these guys are like, sort of in their prime for bossa nova being played in the US. So you have Joao Gilberto, you have Sergio Mendes, Bola Set, and Luis Bonfa. That is a fantastic lineup of bossa nova musicians who were very sort of instrumental, pun intended, of bringing the style to the US and popularizing it. So could be interesting. I've not heard this material. It's on 180 gram vinyl, so at least they put some attention to it. Could be one to look out for those interested in bossa nova. All right, so what would Record Store Day be without a Jazz Dispensary volume? So this next one, I forget what number it is, but folks who buy the Jazz Dispensary volumes, they have to have them all. And I don't. I think I have like one or two. I think I have two of them. They are fantastic. What I really like about Jazz Dispensary is that they pick sort of under the radar tracks. They compile them on an album that almost has like a consistent sort of like super laid back, like chill theme. And so it makes it one of those albums that you can put on, especially if you're like hosting or something. And I don't know, it kind of like sets a cool tone. And I know that what they're going for with the whole like weed thing, but that's, I don't know. I just like the sort of laid back kind of element with the volumes that they put out. So this one is titled Hotel Jolie Dame. And it is put out, it's put out by Jazz Dispensary, which is a craft subsidiary. There's a variety of interesting musicians on this thing, especially given the vibe that they usually go for, because some of the folks are a little bit sort of older school, but it's newer recordings. So you have Dizzy Gillespie on this thing. You have the Blackbirds, which was a Donald Byrd produced group. You have Dorothy Ashby. You have Flora Purim, and then you have Cal Jader as well. So some interesting, among others, right? There's going to be, I think there's like 8 or 9 tracks or something on this thing. So they're putting this out in a quantity of 5,000. I saw elsewhere 4,500, but anyway, 45 to 5,000. So pretty widely available. These things usually actually don't sell out. I think that the last time I was at a record store, I actually saw the Jazz Dispensary volume from the previous Record Store Day. So, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get it. I feel like some people sometimes try to seek out stuff only because they think it's going to sell out rather than whether they're going to enjoy it or not. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Anyway, they're putting it out on color vinyl, and they're calling it a Psych Sunset Orange Marble vinyl. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. The packaging is always pretty interesting for this stuff. Not necessarily the highest like quality cardboard necessarily, but it's always like an interesting image and sometimes do like a die cut thing. It's anyway, it's usually pretty interesting packaging. I personally think that these are fun, and I know that there's a lot of folks who are into this. All right, so the next one is a Walter Bishop Jr. title. It is called Bish at the Bank. Perhaps his nickname was Bish. I don't know, for Bishop. Could be. So live in Baltimore, it is a double LP. They're putting this out in a quantity of 2,000. I think that's a US quantity, and then worldwide, they're putting out maybe an additional 1,000 because I saw 3,000 elsewhere in terms of total quantities. So this is going to be 180 gram vinyl transferred from original tape reels. They didn't say all analog, but they did say 180 gram transferred from original tape reels. The lineup on this is pretty interesting. So you have Harold Vick, Lou McIntosh, and Dick Burke. This is 1966 and 1967 recordings, which I personally think is pretty exciting for Walter Bishop's work because I really liked what he was doing in the later 60s and then into the 70s. In total, there's 100 minutes of music, so there's a lot of content here across this double LP. So this could be a interesting one to look out for. All right, so that actually covers us for at least the US only, not US only, but like the releases that are going to be in the US. So I've seen other lists that mention other titles, and I think that these might only be, say, Europe exclusive or at least international market exclusive. So I'm not going to cover them in any detail. What I will say is that there's one by Ben Webster that's called In Hot House. It is on Tidal Waves Music. It's 1979 Netherlands music. I don't know much about this. I know it was put out on CD, but again, I don't think that's going to be released in the US. I think it's a Europe only. There's also one by Wendell Harrison called Fly By Night. I think this is Europe only as well. It was put out on CD and digital format, I want to say like 2 years ago. So that one is coming out, and actually that one has Cecil McBee on it. Kind of sounded interesting to me. But again, I don't think it's in the U.S. And then the last one that I kind of wish was in the U.S. is Yusef Lateef, Detroit. It's like latitude 42 degrees, longitude 83 degrees, something like that. I want to say it was originally on Atlantic, but Brownswood Recordings is putting this one out, and I believe it's the first vinyl reissue since since it first came out. And for some reason, I haven't found this on any U.S. release schedule, so I think that it is international exclusive, and that sometimes happens, right? We don't always get all the same titles that they do internationally, but don't be jealous because they don't get a lot of the titles, or at least they're not as easy to get over there, right? So we usually in the US kind of make out ahead when it comes to accessing some of these record store day releases. So that is the lineup for April 22nd, coming up in just a couple of months. So as I said up front, there isn't a whole lot that immediately grabs me, but there are a couple of titles that I think are especially interesting, and I'm sort of cycling back through right now. So almost in like reverse order of what I discussed, I think that Walter Bishop one is pretty interesting. I don't think a lot of people are aware of Walter Bishop and are necessarily going to be looking for that. Which means that if you are interested, and I am, then it may actually be one that you can get. The fact that it's from the original tapes, that it's 180 gram, Harold Vick, I mean, there's a lot to like on that one. Jazz Dispensary is always a good one, and if I see that, I'll probably pick it up. Let me see what else. See, I'm not a huge Sonny Stitt fan. Eric Dolphy, right? So the 1963 New York studio sessions, that's a triple LP release. I personally think that one sounds interesting. I don't need the miles. I mentioned that I liked On the Corner, and I love that album a lot, and I've had the original sessions, or the sort of the full sessions. I almost feel like I should go back and buy that CD box set if that's what I really want. I don't know if I need like a single LP kind of compilation of that material. Maybe that's just me. Otherwise, let's see, New York Rebels I already have. Chet Baker, I mean, so that one in mono. The problem is I have an original pressing and it's in fantastic shape. Do I really need a reissue? But it's by Kraft, and wouldn't that be fun for a shootout later? We'll see. Otherwise, I don't think I need Charlie. I don't need Bill Evans. That might be it. That might be it in terms of like me reflecting on everything that I just went through. So this usually happens to me. Like I'm not one of these buy everything kind of guys. Like even if I saw all of these available, I wouldn't be buying stuff just because I felt like I needed record store day releases. That's not really my game. I like going, and if there's like one or maybe two titles that I'm interested in, then I'll go for those and I'll leave everything else. Flipping stuff, you're not going to win flipping stuff. It doesn't really work out. I think with Quiet Kenny, maybe 2 years ago, some people were making money. By and large, though, you're going to wait like how many hours in line to get a record, and then you're going to try to flip it, and then you're going to pay eBay fees and like deal with all that. Like there's not money to be made on most of this stuff unless you're going for like Taylor Swift stuff. I don't know. So anyway, that's not my game. I'm picking stuff to actually keep and listen to, and that's kind of my assessment. So let me know, as I said earlier, if I missed anything. Let me know what you're excited about, and hit subscribe. So thanks very much for watching.